Hope my screen is visible. I'll just start. Okay. Okay, I'm just happy with the way Santana gave my introduction. I'll just proceed on to the next things. 1 second, let me switch on my video also. Okay, now you can see me. Okay, these are the offerings provided by MyDBOps for its client and anywhere that you are. Okay, so let's move into the today's agenda. So we'll just discuss about what is BPF and what is the evolution of eBPF, and we'll discuss about how the eBPF works internally with respect to the kernel, and we will have a small set of demo with limited tools. Okay, so this is our agenda for today. Okay, so first, what is the difference between eBPF? I'll start from there. And before that, I'll just say some history about BPF. So BPF is basically a Berkeley packet filter. Okay, so basically it is used to filter the incoming packets based on the context. This was the first use case on which it was developed. It was developed in 1992 by Steve McCann and Van Jacobson. And initially it was integrated into a BSD flavor of Unix or the Linux system. And you can see they have developed this package even in 1992. Okay, and this package was built with the efficiency. That means this package is completely integrated into a Linux kernel as a virtual machine, similar to a virtual machine. We call it as a sandbox inside the kernel, which works with the Linux kernel, capturing the packet, filtering them, and sending to the user space. This was the first use case on which the BPF was built. And later in 1997, they introduced this packet, that is a BPF packages, into the Linux kernel, and they started shipping with every flavor of Linux. And later in the year, the development was going on, and in the year 2014, right, the term eBPF, like they extended the usage of BPF just not only from the packet filtering. They use the eBPF kernel module to monitor almost everything within the system. Okay, means right from your block level system, file system, everything can be monitored using the BPF. So they coined the term eBPF. That means it is an extended version of packet filtering. So now eBPF has become an acronym. It is not because it is not only does the packet filtering, now it has become a complete technology. So I'm just mentioning about a small description between eBPF. You can see the block diagram. So BPF was built on 32-bit registers, and eBPF has having a 64-bit registers, and the stack memory has increased much, and eBPF has an internal map to store the your data as a key value pair and render it. We can see later in the slide. Okay, so everyone has a system in other way of the around. So the system runs performance prior to the eBPF, right? Or the things, what we do is we just log into the system whenever there's a performance issue. We just run the uptime of the system, dmsh, vm. These are some of the list of the commands which we use to monitor the system. So these are still valid, so we use in our day-to-day production life. So but what it is, okay, so this is just based on a proc file system for each process ID which is being created. What is the usage? Basically this proc file system is basically a post process. That means once your resource usage is completed, you will come to know what is the usage. Actually, it is a kind of a post-mortem report which it provides. But on the other hand, BPF is a dynamic tracing which is instantaneous and synchronous with respect to the trace points which is emit. Okay, so this is a basic difference which you are trying to address. And when you run these kinds of a performance analysis tool, that is a pre-BPF tools like IOStat, Freeze, or too many monitorings can completely hinder your system. That means they also substantially use some amount of resources to collect these stats and pump it up to your screen. So this is another performance overhead provided by the monitoring tool itself. So to avoid these cases, we have a eBPF which is highly efficient because it sits inside the kernel itself, and it also efficiently tracks everything from the bottom layer. So now let's jump to the next slide. So I'll just, this is a brief explanation of BPF. So as I said earlier, it is an in kernel. So it is just similar to a sandbox program which is lying inside the kernel itself. And BPF is a system call. So based on this, I have given a just small intro on the how to call the system call. It's a command what you are passing and the attributes, and it also have a variable assignment. It's also done. So currently eBPF is under development, as I said. So eBPF now currently attaches to the kprops, trace points, uprops. These are all the events that is being, and based on this they get attached to each of this in the kernel itself. Okay, so on top of BPF we have BCC. So BCC is, it's a kind of a tooling which is written top of that, and also we have many more projects. We'll discuss it later. Okay, so as I said, as it sits inside the kernel itself, this is a kernel architecture. So you can see the user mode applications here, the kernel mode drivers or the BPF program which sits inside the kernel, and it is like a virtual machine which is sitting inside the kernel and runs and sends to the hardware. That is a model called microkernel. That means your kernel is being divided into smaller units. Okay, so this is basically a screenshot which explains the development of the eBPF or the packet filtering which is happening. That means the later the kernel versions, from version 4.4, we have a dynamic improvement with respect to the code quality and the toolings around it. So later the kernel version, better means you can always use the latest kernel to reap the best benefit of eBPF. Okay, so this is the Git commit page with respect to each kernel version, what they have done with respect to BPF. So from now on, when I say BPF, it is actually BPF. It's not an acronym anymore. Okay. Okay, now let's jump on to the internals, how BPF internally works to provide this efficiency of monitoring with respect to dynamicity. Okay, so this is an internal architecture and block diagram of BPF. So BPF has an verifier, okay, and an interpreter, JIT compiler, BPF context, and this is a basic block diagram. I'll just explain what each block does. So BPF instruction is basically that is a program or the code which you write on top of this BPF call. So what is the basic functionality of verifier? So since it is inside the kernel, okay, so each program which is run against this has to be verified, because when you run an endless loop, okay, since it is in the kernel, because kernel is a major part of the operating system, when you just start hooking up the kernel with an endless loop, it can completely block your system from any further action. So the verifier, so endless loop is being avoided. So verifier makes that sends to the interpreter compiles the code. JIT is another compiler, which is a just-in-time compiler, which makes the interpreted code into a actual machine code and sends it for execution. So BPF then executes the code with help of the BPF helpers and the registers by making it the variable assignments and these things. And final code execution is stored in a map byte storage. That is it's similar to a key value pair, and it's from there it is asynchronously or synchronously sends to the user space, that is your GUI or your screen. Okay, so this is the things I have explained earlier. This is just a hint of what is being done. Okay, so now let's see the block diagram, how it internally works. So user program is your program, means the instruction, it can be written in a BCC program or a Python code or a C code, what we run, and you generate a byte code and it's being attached by a verifier. Verifies the sanity of the program which you write, and it calls a BPF program. The BPF is actually attached to the kernel with respect to the kprops, that is the kernel props, uprops are the user props, and trace points with respect to the each functionalities and performance event. It emits with respect to the performance event, and from there the map event stores the information and it sends back to the user space. Okay, this is the internal working of BPF. Okay, so this diagram explains the current state of BPF, like a tooling which is built over the BPF. So you can see the SDN configuration, DDoS mitigation. These are similar to a tools which can be written over the BPF, and you can use it. It's kind of a tooling, and there are much more companies which are coming with new tools with respect to the BPF because of its dynamicity, and the resource consumption is very negligible with respect to the system, the monitoring tool. So they are making up new tools with respect to BPF on top of BPF basically. Okay, so this is a small snippet of image which is taken from the Brendan Gregg blog. So he actually says, hope everyone knows about Brendan Gregg. He's a performance architect at Netflix. So this is a small snippet taken from for explaining the tools which is available for the each subsystem. Okay, you can see there are many tools for BFS, even from the device drivers, net mappings, and don't get panicked by the markings of red and black. So black is just a stable tool which is already exist, and red is a upcoming new tools which is being developed, and it is pushed to the for the code quality and check. Okay, so now I'm just giving a closer view of the subsystem, which can be monitored by eBPF. That means it can monitor almost all the subsystems which is available with respect to the system, like the CPU, memory, disk, file system, what and what not. Okay, well, all the things can be monitored with respect to eBPF. Okay, now let's jump on to the installations. As I said earlier, so it is great to have a kernel version which is greater than 4.4 with which we can use a full benefit of my the BPF. And next, I'll just explain the installation with respect to Ubuntu as well as CentOS. So for Ubuntu, you can just use BPFCC tools, that is a package name, and also you can update your kernel headers. This is for Ubuntu 18.04, that is a Bionic Beaver version, and the tools which are installed, right, it will be having a BFCC extension. So this is with respect to 18, and by default the tools are installed in SBin location. Okay, so I just mentioned about BCC. BCC is also similar to IOVisor. IOVisor is a project or a which is written on top of BPF for efficient kernel tracing, and they write manipulate tools and include useful tools along with that. Okay, so this is again installation with respect to the latest versions. That is a BCC tool packaging name. And okay, so on the installation of the CentOS, I'll just explain with a live demo. From here, I'll stop the screen. I'll just switch the screen to my demo session. Just hold on for a second. Okay, hope my screen is visible. Okay, for the purpose of this demo, I have spent an AWS instance running on a CentOS 8. Okay, I'll just walk you through all the steps. Okay, okay, I'm using a CentOS version 8.2 and with the kernel version as okay 4.18. Now let's proceed to install it. So the major feature of CentOS 8 is that so there is no need of installing any repos, because CentOS 6 comes with a pre-installed repo. That means you have their tool already available in your repository and you can just install it. Okay. Sorry. So while running the test, I have made some FIO files that have, okay. Okay, hope it should be clear. Okay. So you can see I have my tool already installed. That means I have already installed my BCC package. Okay, I'll show you the package. Okay, so I have my installed my BCC package and the related libraries with respect to Python as well. So by default, you can see all the tools are being installed in user share BCC tools. Okay, so these are the list of tools or some list of tools which is being installed. This is a stabler version of the tools. And now we will just proceed to see what this each tool does, not about all the tools. I'll just explain about 10 to 15 tools. So first tool I'm going to install is a basic use case. Okay, bash read line. So what this command line tool does is, so everyone wants to track of what are the commands which is being run inside your system. For example, you're just logging into your system and there were too many commands is being run or fired. You see a performance hit, and you want to know what are the commands which is being actively run onto the system. Okay, so just I have a two session open. So one, I'm just running the command. Okay, on the next session you can see the time PID and command. On the next session I'm just running ls. Okay, you can see whatever the command I type on the other session is being tracked with respect to your with the bash readline script. Okay, with this script, right, you can track whatever the user is doing on a whole within the system. Okay, with the login. Just clean up the screen. To close any tool, right, while it is running, you can just hit a control C. You just close the tool, you can come out. So, and I'm going to explain another tool. Okay, so next will be TTY Snoop. So what it does is, as a name suggests, you might have guessed it. So it is used to snoop into their shell. For example, you can see we have a three shells active, that is PTS0, PTS2, and PTS3. So while you log into a system for performance troubleshooting, you see these three shells to be active, and you wanted to know what this each shell is doing, or someone has logged into the system, what they're intending to do. So what you can do is, okay, I'll just track the current session. Okay, ps hyphen p dollar of so I get my current session. So this is my PTA0. This is a session for this, and I'm trying to snoop. Okay, I'll snoop the session 0. I just type 0 here as an argument to the BCC tool. Okay, now it is now my other screen, that is the active screen, is being tracked via the other thing. You can see whatever the things I'm running here, it's being tracked. Okay, and also have a MySQL installed here. Okay, whatever I'm doing, you can see how instance it is being tracked. It's near real time with respect to the tracking. So you can actually track the users, what they're doing. This can be attached to your TTY screen as well as to a system level consoles. For example, if you're using a screen, and this command also can be tracked. Okay, I'm just closing it. Okay, the tool is now closed, and also I close the session here. Okay. Okay. Now let's see some of the commands with respect to each of the subsystem. For example, you have a IO system subsystem. You want to track the slowness with. You can see my disk. It is a AWS instance, so it is a attached storage. I have basically a root partition attached and a valid MySQL partition as a data directory being attached. So on this session, on the second session, I'm running a F5O test. Okay, 1 second. I'm running a FIO inside my data directory. Okay, I'm running a FIO test to simulate the load, and I also wanted to track. So it is running, starting and end process. So I wanted to track the latency with respect to the disk. So I just drop down a command, DIO latency. Okay, T with respect to 1. So what this tool does is it collects the information with respect to your IO subsystem at the block level, not at the file system level, at the block level, and it gives you a histographical view of it. Means you can see with respect to the mu seconds. Mu is the time taken for each IO request. You can see the IO request is taking much time. This is in nanoseconds because I'm running a FIO. You can it produces a histographical output, and you can make it much granular, by changing it to millisecond granularity. Okay. You can see now this helps in tracking your block IO system. That means you can see now it is got completed. You can see an empty result set. That means there is no IO usage with respect to the system. Now you got to know that there is some IO blocking. Okay, now there is some IO blocking which is blocking the IO system, and you wanted to know what is the process which is hoping your IO subsystem. Now there is another command for that. Okay, dot slash bio top. Okay, this is similar to a top which you run on your system, and it just tops out all the block IO process. Okay, now again I'll start a FIO process. Okay, you can see FOA is completely using the CPU. You can see the what is the process which is running. It's a read or a write. I have given a mix of read, right? So it is mix of both R, you can see as read, and W, and the disk which is being used, and the IO size which is being pumped in, and the KBs of byte which is being written, and the average latency in milliseconds that is being provided. So you can have a live tracking of your IO subsystem. Okay, let's close it and just move on to the next tool. Okay, so now you have a clear picture of your block IO subsystem with respect to the latency level. And now let's move to a next level, that is a file system. Okay, so everyone has a own file system, maybe a ext4, XFS, and BCC has its own tool for all the things. I'm using a XFS file system. You can see the XFS file system I have mounted. So there is a command XFS distribution. So this tracks the traceability of the file system, means it tracks the file system and checks what is file system is up to, what the file system is actually doing. This also provides a output in a histogram format with respect to the same as BIO latency. I'm just changing the time frame to have a trackability and making it as 1. Okay. So now I'm not running anything, so I'm not hitting on anything. Let's see, once I start the process, you can just instantaneously, you can see the histograms pumping up. That means it is the monitoring is almost real time. I'll just close it, let it run. So I'll just explain the next tool also. So we have a distribution. That means, so most of our process, which is running in 4 to 7 nanoseconds, which is actually good. And we want to track down the process which is running. We can use the next tool. XFS flow. Now you have seen most of the process is running in nanoseconds. So this tool works at the milliseconds granularity, tracking all the IOs, slow IOs, which is running beyond milliseconds. Now I have the default is 10 milliseconds, and I'll just reduce it. To reduce the granularity, you can have just type 1. So it tracks in all the millisecond granularity, and I'll just start the FIO again. Okay. You are seeing an empty result because as in the previous thing, we have seen all our IOs are going in a nanosecond latency. We are not able to track here. So this tool really helps in tracking of IO subsystem slowness. You can see the write is being happened on this system and it's being slow, which is taking a 3 millisecond latency, which is being tracked. You can see the command FIO. Just close it off. Okay. Now let's move on to the next subsystem, that is our CPU. Okay, CPU is our main subsystem. The similar, we have a tracking with respect to CPU. We have CPU distribution, same as XFS, and also with respect to file system, we have file system for all, even for ext4, BTFR, SSFS. We have toolings around all the file system which is available. Now let's go to the CPU subsystem. Sorry. CPU distribution. I'm just changing it to milliseconds. sorry, I'll change it to nanosecond. Okay. So you can see 0 to 1 milliseconds. That means the CPU, the count of process which is moving in a point one less than 1 milliseconds is 6256. That means our system is performing well. There is not much of a bottleneck with respect to CPU. When it goes beyond, when you see the count increasing with respect to the next level, that is 4 to 7 milliseconds or 8 to milliseconds, that means there is a hog in your CPU and you can troubleshoot it. Just run with nanosecond. Okay. Next is you can, with along with the CPU, you can track your run queue also. For example, sorry, run queue. Okay. Okay, this clearly shows your distribution of your run queues with respect to nanoseconds and in a histographical format. So now let's move on to the next subsystem, that is your memory. That means we want to see what is your cache hit ratio with respect to the memory subsystem. How is the memory caches being handled properly, or if there is any misses with respect to cache. We have cache top. Which okay, basically captures all your cache hits and misses with respect to memory subsystem. Got it. I'll just so next I'll just move on to the networking part. So we have many tools around networking. So for example, I can type a TCP top, which which sits onto the networking. That means what is the incoming packets which is being transferred. Right now I'm just using a SSH only. I'm using SSH for the connectivity. So this is my local address and this is my remote address where I connect to this particular server. So I'm not using anything other than this. So another use case, another important use case what we get is, so even when you are running a MySQL subsystem, you might be having a DNS subsystem which internally works. There might be cases wherein your MySQL is running faster with respect to the DNS resolution, right? DNS resolution might get slowed down for, and you don't have any idea. So basically we do a skip name resolve to temporarily solve it, but it is not the actual fix. You can just maintain, or you can just know the DNS latencies which is provided with respect to each host. For example, we have a good tooling around it, get host latency. Okay, so I'm just pinging a google.com. Okay, you can see the latency which is done only for the resolution of the google.com. So just go to the name server, just resolve it. For that it took a 2.59 milliseconds. I'm just doing another just for example. Okay, you can see it is not optimized. That means it is taking a 4 milliseconds because our domain is hosted somewhere else. Okay. So next, I would like to explain the other tools. For example, the opening of files. So basically, with a server, there'll be a lot of file openings, closings, and these things. So we have a special tool to manipulate the opening of a file. For example, if there is new opening or the file is being opened with an exec system call. Okay, you can see exec snoop, which snoops in all the file system opening with respect to a particular system, what is being accessed by a process. Okay, for example. Okay, I just logged into MySQL. You can see the MySQL is being accessed. Okay. Okay. So this is for a call which is opening newly. That means it basically opens a file or opens a new system call, that is exec. And other important thing is that I'll just close it and just come back. Hello. Hello. So can we have the question session, Kabi? You're running out of time. Uh, just last one tool, that is OpenSWIFT. That's it. I'll complete the things. Okay, just only one tool. Okay, basically this tracks all the openings of with respect to the file. For example, just opened a MySQL client. You can see what are the files it has touched or what are the files it has tried to open. This helps in tracking of really a log file size or a log file which is being continuously hit, or some file which is being continuously called or opened, maybe a malicious attack, and these things can be tracked easily. So with this, I'll close my demo. Okay, so I'll just go back to my shares. Okay, so I'll continue with the things. I'll just have two slides more to complete. So next, what is next? So we have a special exporters a built which is top of this eBPF for pulling. So nobody likes a not like nobody wants to see all the tools. There's typing in tools. It's like a time consuming task, and everyone likes a GUI tool. So Cloudflare has its own BPF exporter which is built with help which sends the information or the stats information to Prometheus, and that can be graphed along with the Grafana. So, and also we have extended PMM support. I hope everyone knows about PMM, and it is being used for performance monitoring analysis. For PMM also provision to have external support for the exporters by which you can integrate eBPF exporters with it. And Netflix has its own GUI tool called Vector, which is being built upon eBPF. They use day in and day out for all the performance monitoring and other use cases at Facebook. is also using BPF, and the usage of the BPF is getting increased more and more. And these are some of the references. With this, I'll close my talk here and hand over the dais to Santana again back.